It's deadline day across Europe. Isn't that exciting? Lots of moves happening, maybe. Often they're quite dull, actually, but still nothing happening as far as I know for John David, although I believe he can still sign a pre-contract anytime. I don't think that is just through, right, Nate? That's not just through the January window, is it? He could sign a pre-contract with anyone at any time.
Well, it depends where you're at in your contract, but he's in his last year, correct? His last 6. Once you get into your last 6 months, it opens up everything. That's
so
when
you're not.
you're
not confined just within the window, though. He could sign next month, for example.
Or
is that not the case?
I don't know. Details like letter of intents and stuff. I don't know how much those hold up. I've heard some horror stories, and I've seen players kind of back out of stuff. Anything you put a signature on paper, that's when it becomes real. But I mean, we've seen it time again. People holding out in preseason. Even at beloved Liverpool, there's been issues. It's just the way it goes. So until there's an official move, I don't think anything's legit.
Right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that one. But Tejan Buchanan to Villarreal. And this morning just saw, I think, Fabrizio Romano's saying let's go. It's a done deal. Here we go. Kone to Rennes in France from Marseille.
15th place in Liga. Rennes.
5 points in safety, right?
Yeah.
So just about hanging in there. They need some reinforcements in midfield. But Nate, for Kone, a guy that struggled at Marseille, we heard what his manager said last week about him. Going to a lower team, maybe a bit less pressure, a smaller club, although Rennes not a tiny club by any stretch. But it seems to be a pretty smart move, I would think.
You think so? I don't know about less pressure. Definitely different pressure. Like you're jumping into a relegation battle. I'd have to see how many points clear they are. But if you're a guy that's going to be relied on, brought in mid-season, and you're expected to help keep them up, that's going to be a different type of pressure around the club. But it would be great. You'd much rather that than the situation he was at, where obviously the manager didn't favor him or didn't think he was ready or whatever the case was, right? Who knows what's going on in that locker room, but it would have been difficult for him going in, and they were pretty high on him early, and you thought it might be a team where he could get in and be a regular and move into, when you're talking about a club that big that maybe get into Champions League and make some waves. And instead you're watching from the stands. It's not what you dream up. So I'm sure he was just looking for a fresh start, and I'm hopefully Rennes is exactly what he needs.
What do you think, Nate? Like he's a young man. He's 22. I think, Buchanan goes to Villarreal. He gets the number 9. I think that speaks to what kind of player they think he's going to be. Kone, maybe it all went sideways on him when he went to Marseille and they gave him number 51. And everybody said that was doomed from the start because it's the same as the number on a bottle of pastis. So it's kind of like JP, my husband who played pro hockey a couple of levels below NHL, has buddies that he played with in East Coast Hockey League that would go to like a Habs camp or Chicago Blackhawks camp, and they'd be like, "What number did you get for camp?" And he'd be like, "Number 78." He's like, "Don't unpack your bags. You're not staying for a long time, right?"
Nate's got number 306 down in San Diego right now.
Exactly. It kind of measures your expectations, right? But really, my question is, it might be a good move for him. I think it's a great move for him. There was discussion, Valencia was maybe in the running, a couple of other clubs that showed some interest when there wasn't very much kind of going on after De Zerbi's comments last week. It looked pretty bleak for him. But he might be going to some place where he's going to be able to regain his footing and establish himself as like a penciled in starter. But what about what's plagued him for a long time now, ever since he started his pro career with CF Montreal, is that his lack of professionalism and his kind of laissez-faire attitude. Have you played with guys, and this is not an accusation levied at you because you are the utmost professional, but have you played with guys where you've seen them make that turn successfully, where it needs a little bit of a shakeup, and then they see the way and they learn from the mentors around them and they get on the right course in terms of being a good professional?
Of course. Yeah. I don't know Kone personally, so I'd be hesitant to, make a comment on his professionalism, but obviously we've heard news or stories in the news But every player goes through these transition periods, and you deal with adversity. Like one thing we talk about a lot is, obviously I played in second division, or I mean Canadians first division, but second division my whole career. And when you kind of grind through these leagues and you get, I think I'm going into my 10th year, you see other guys that have got to their 10th year, you know, there's an immediate respect between you guys, because you know how hard it is to last that long. Like you're going to deal with a lot, whether that's injuries, whether that's issues with coaching, whether that's, you know, getting dropped behind a guy, or, you know, it is a roller coaster. It's a grind. And either you deal with the adversity and you push through, or you don't. You know, there's a lot of professionals that just get one contract because it's a different world, difficult. It's not fair. You can't make reason of a lot of things. And either, again, you deal with it and you fight through, or you say, woe is me, right? Like I know a lot of guys that haven't got a second contract, or a lot of guys that didn't have a long career. And I'll tell you what, if anyone stopped playing professional sports before they decided to retire, it was never because they weren't good enough. It was either the coach fucked them or they got injured, right? Like there's never been a guy that's just like, yeah, I got 1 or 2 contracts, but I just wasn't good enough at soccer. It's like I've never. Now, you know, for the guys that don't have the best attitude, or the guys that are kind of, I feel for some of them, because some people just are that type of person, right? They're like just a bit more chill, and that's how they live life. And if you have a manager that doesn't quite understand that, then it looks like they're taking the piss, or they don't really care. But it's not necessarily the case, right? Like if they're showing up every day on time and they're working hard, but they kind of like glide around the pitch, you know, sometimes you need a manager that just understands you better. And sometimes you get into a situation where that works for you. Now, other guys, of course, if you are a bit lazy, I mean, you got to change, or you're going to be the same problem everywhere. And you're going to get a reputation for yourself, and they're going to bring you in. And if you're not skilled enough, then again, they're sending you home. If you look at the lower levels, there's a lot of really talented players. There's usually a reason they're there, right? If there's someone that looks too good for a lower division that's in the lower division, you got to find out why they're there. And sometimes it's the attitudes thing. Sometimes it's they like to party. Sometimes, you know, who knows what it could be. But yeah, everyone's got a story, and it all shakes out in the wash. Usually you end up where you should be after, you know, X amount of time. So he's going to go through Montreal. He just went through Marseille. He's going to be at Rennes. He's going to kind of find his groove wherever that is. And then the next move, you'll probably find out a lot about his character and his skill level.
Yeah, because it comes to a point where immaturity can't be the excuse. You're not a kid anymore. You're a professional footballer. You've been around the block a little bit. And he's getting to the point now where these moves to Watford, to Marseille, they came really, really soon. Probably a little bit too soon, maybe. I know, Dubs, forgive me. Who was speaking to Wilfred Nancy?
Ollie.
It was Ollie Brett.
It was Ollie Brett.
On his podcast, Au Fond des Filets. It's a great one.
Fond des Filets.
Yeah, and really enlightening perspective on Nancy's time with Kone. I mean, Nancy, Dubs knew the talent the kid had, but just trying to drum into his head, this is what you need to do. Pushed Nancy to the edge, it seems.
But
right?
That story that Dubs told us about a veteran having to be his kind of cab driver, hey, we're going now, that tells you a lot about agency too as a professional. You like, there's that level of, hey, we all played sports with people like Nate just said that, you know, kind of glide, and they're talented and you don't always know what they're doing. But being on time, making sure you're prepared the night before, there's these small little things that you can do. And if he's not even doing that, and he's playing for CF Montreal at the time, and then Marseille, it does show a level of whether it's immaturity or just he doesn't care enough about wanting to be a pro. And that could be it, right?
How old was he when he signed for CF Montreal? Was he 16?
No, I think he was later than that. He went through NDG. He wasn't in their academy system at all. Then he was with Saint Laurent. And then he maybe signed as part of the reserve squad, and then almost immediately made the leap to, as a cat in Sharman's background, immediately made the leap to the first team. So that is something else to give some context to that chat that Wilfred Nancy had with Ollie Brett. He said, like, Kone almost broke me, but he taught me patience. And he's kind of one of my success stories because he understood the context of the behavior, that he didn't have the luxury of kind of going through an academy system where all of that professionalism, the understanding of what's expected of you is just built in. But now, 4 years later, there should be an understanding of what that is. And I think what maybe works against him, and it shouldn't be an excuse, but it's maybe something that's woven in, is his style of play, which is so effortless. You talked about gliding around the pitch. That's Kone. Right? Where he does all the work, but sometimes compared to a player like me, where it was effortful, you could see all of the effort that I was giving on the pitch, for better or for worse. No, running. Not so much, but there was lots of slide tackling and shouting and gesturing and not making sure everybody knew how much work I was putting in, but that it was very evident. There was very little grace. And with Kone, there's a shit ton of it, right? He's clearly gifted and there's an ease about everything that he does. So does that work against him? Maybe a little bit, but the professionalism should just be there underpinning whatever style of play you have as a professional.
You really made the game look hard, Dubs.
Yeah, I know. Look at all the effort I'm putting in.
It's a great point, though, because you see at any level, you see a real athlete, move around the pitch. It does look effortless. Mm-hmm. And the plumbers out there freaking huffing and puffing. A lot of fan bases will be drawn to that player, though, more than the effortless. Remember Matt Sundin with the Leafs, right? A fantastic player, but such a big guy, long stride, graceful. He was a legend. People loved him, but there's always that, like, he could give it a little bit more. Why can he give a little bit? But he was giving it all.
Yeah, like one thing I always talk about is life's relative, right? I learned this in university. The same guy that was, doing 10 reps in the gym is the same guy that's cleaning his dishes after he eats, is the same guy that's doing all his homework, is the same guy that's tracking back on defense. Like, everything you do, with very few exceptions, is the way you live your life. Now, the same guy doing 9 out of 10 in the gym is the same guy not cleaning up after himself, the same guy not going to class, the same guy, Now with Kone, yeah.
That was like a Muppet.
That would be me. No.
Not putting his shopping cart away.
No, I always do that.
In my opinion, you don't get a guy that can play like Kone and move like Kone and see the game like Kone if you don't have that same guy off the pitch. That's just a little bit more chill. That doesn't, is on island time that a lot of people say where, it's like, yeah, lunch is at 12, but like, I had to wash my hair or whatever, like we do things like, why are you so mad? It's 12 o'clock, like it's 12:02. It's like, why are you mad? And you have to, like, it's fair enough, they live in a different world sometimes. So again, a good manager like Nancy, I mean, I think we can all agree, I think he's one of the best managers in North America at the minute. He's proven that. He was a guy that clearly understood it and that was trying to help him out and get him to where he needs to be. Unfortunately, like you said, when you get over to Europe and you're in top divisions, they don't have time for that. They expect a certain level of professionalism. They expect everyone's been that's been drilled into them since they were 10 years old, something that Kone didn't have, right? So we'll see that word potential starts to go out the window soon as well, where there's a time where a player's career switches where you have to be on the field and you have to be helping the team win games. And it's no longer like, oh, he'll be good in a couple of years, or he'll learn under him and then be ready. So he's getting to that stage now too. So like I said, I really hope it works out at Rennes. And I hope he helps that team stay out of relegation. And sometimes when you give more responsibility to a guy, it helps them grow up as well. So, maybe that's the case here.
You wonder if Marcus Rashford is the English version of this right now, heading to Villa. Now, he's accomplished more in his career. I know that fantastic footballer had some great years, but there is that a lack of professionalism that just can piss off coaches. That lackadaisicalness on the training field. Because I mean, that if you told me that 5 years ago, Marcus Rashford's playing for Aston Villa, I wouldn't believe you. This guy was supposed to be one of the solutions to England. He was going to be a world-class footballer. Had everything.
How hard would it be though? I can't relate to this at all, but like, how hard would it be to be that young, Kone, Rashford, similar situations, and then have the media talking about you and have, people saying you're going to help the country and you're going to be a standout and, one of the top clubs in the country. And you're just, trying to play your video games and kick the ball around.
Mm-hmm.
It's unfair for sure.
It's just difficult. I don't know how, some people I'm sure thrive on it, but others, I don't think they want that at all. And after a few years of that, if you're not, how quickly do you have to progress before people give you a break?
But Rashford's not a lazy guy, though, right? I mean, he took it upon himself to cure world hunger during the pandemic, or okay, a bit of a stretch there, but basically putting food on the table for impoverished kids at school. That was his choice. He did that. He's got a work ethic.
Oh no, I'm not doubting that he does it all, and he's had serious success at Man United and for the national team. Like anyone, if you look at his career, it's an unbelievable career. But again, when you put those expectations on him so early, people are arguing that maybe he hasn't had a good career. It's like, what are we talking about? He's been at United for how long? And at United when they were still a top club before this turmoil started, and then England's most successful generation, he's been involved.
That's a great point, actually. Yeah, what you look back at Marcus Rashford, what is his career like? Pretty fucking good. For most footballers who dream to have that career. But it's because we expected so much more. And longevity is something, right? I mean, how old is he now? He's no longer a kid. But if you're a Villa fan, I think you should be very excited, Dubs. I mean, you have a massive talent coming in. You've lost Jean Duran. Buendia, I think, has left as well, or is about to leave, right? This guy, potentially under Unai Emery, could be a difference maker.
Yeah, and apparently Villa's approach to secure Rashford on loan from United was at Emery's request. So I think that combination, and he's 27. So and you look at the body of work and
11 years at United.
And I think it's even more.
It's more than that. Yeah,
we were talking. I was just about to refer to. I think Jimmy last week, including the academy.
2005, he joined the academy.
20 years at United.
Oh wow!
Like that's unbelievable. Talk about the weight of expectations, right? Waiting
always
for him
seen as being that. From a very young age, he was being pinpointed as being, watch out for this boy.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think he's proven when he's on his game that he's one of the most threatening attackers in the game. But when is the last time he's been on form? We haven't seen it, right? And so it's the weight of expectations for sure. Is this a better setup for him? Yes, clean slate, all that stuff. But can he regain it? I'm not sure if he can.
I mean, some players, Nate, and this, you have teammates, they play with a certain joy. They just love being out there. I haven't seen that from Marcus Rashford for a very long time. He looks labored out there, like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's never happy. That must at some point bring your teammates down as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it could. I'm looking at this one from the player perspective, and he's had just a absolute shitstorm in United over the last however long. I don't know how anyone could keep form there. Like their media, I mean, for the casual hockey fan, their media at United is very similar to Toronto Maple Leaf media, right? Like they're on you right away. You don't get an inch. So this guy's been there. He's had a carousel of coaches every 8 months. Like if you average out every coach that's come in, each one has their own style. Each one's trying to figure out how to, get the most out of a player. So, at the beginning, he's probably Moisey comes in, he's talking to Moisey, trying to get, all right, here's what you want from me. All right, we're getting into it. He gets sacked. Mourinho comes in. All right, here's what I want from you. Like he's not been able to get just a run of form with a coaching staff. And all the while media's on him. Like it's not a good place to be. And then he has extra expectation because he's been there the longest, right? Like we were just talking about. So he's the one that's got to show the culture to everyone new. And there's been a carousel of players coming in. And like, I don't envy him. And, one day he wakes up and he's got that experienced locker room and he's following them and he blinks and all of a sudden he's the most senior guy and he's got no one to back him up. And it would be point. I think it's really good for him to get out of there. I know it seemed like you wanted to be a one club man. That's not modern day football. If you can get over to Villa, they look like they have a decent little thing going on right now. You got a coach that's going to be there long term. a good coach as well. And yeah, I think if there's a place you can regain form, that might be it. I mean, it's still London, like it's still a big club, but the media pressure is going to be a tenth of what he's used to. If there's ever a chance for him to regain some form right now and get comfortable, I think this is perfect.
Well, remember what Emery did for Watkins, right? Like Watkins, he encouraged him to really stop drifting towards the channels and to stay really concentrated in the central channel and between the goalposts. And that was transformative for Ollie Watkins in terms of his offensive output and his goal contributions. So maybe he can do the same thing for Marcus Rashford. I mean, you hope, you want him to succeed. And Villa is certainly, I think this season has been highly uneven. Maybe that's the boost that they need, and they can fill the void left by John Duran.
He will look weird though in claret and blue at first.
Yeah.
We're just so used to seeing him in that United red. You know, certain players just don't seem to fit in a certain kit. It's going to take some while. Because I mean, I love that Villa kit. I love claret and blue. It's brilliant, but it's going to be odd. Hope it works out for him because I want to see Marcus Rashford succeed. He's a really good human being. Right? So hopefully he can rediscover it. I'm not saying that Jimmy is the Kone and Rashford of the podcast world, but I do wonder, like, if Jimmy went to like another podcast, would he suddenly be like, you know, boom, yes, here I am, on time every day, ready to go.
He would.
Just despite us.
He would.
And
then how long would that
remarks in the dark web before I'd be, yeah, I'm ready, guys, can't wait. Wouldn't call anyone plums. You know, just wondering. Anyway,
his mic would always work.
Yeah, exactly. He'd actually go out and buy his own mic, a better one.
I wanted to point this out because you brought up the Duran move. How about Chicago Fire front office waking up one morning going, what just happened? Just slapping hands and drinking champagne. Did we just make another $10 million on a sell-on?
I think it's double that, Nate. Because I think I saw Bogert saying that it would, if the move to Saudi Arabia went through, that because they had that sell-on clause, that it would be the record outbound transfer fee for MLS. It's insane.
They might have, correct me if I'm wrong, it might have been the sell-on plus the initial.
Yeah, it could be.
You know what I mean? Either way, but by the total fee is huge, but I don't know what the sell-on, the extra whatever it was, but man, they must have been thinking like, you're kidding, Saudi Arabia? What a great fit. Make sure he does it.
Them, Al Nasser and Duran are the happy parties here. No one else in world football is happy about this because what a waste. Jesus Christ.
I agree.
You know, he's so much fun to watch. He's great and he's young. Maybe he's not too young. He can return to a proper league at some point, but wow. Tough to criticize him though. I mean, just imagine the money he's getting.
We see it every handful of years. There's China, now it's Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what it is. You lose a couple good ones. Oscar, I believe, from Chelsea just went off the map. There's a couple others in that China debacle. And then
Oscar, remember him? Jesus, yeah. Hulk went there as well, I think.
And then we've lost a few good ones to Saudi Arabia as well. But the world keeps on spinning. You don't miss them too much.
No.
And that's
interesting though, talking about sell-on fees. So Grady McDonald, he moves on finally. Oversees a Club Bruges from Vancouver FC, and there's a sell-on fee there, but it's a record CPL deal. 527,000 is what I understand is the price. And listen, we know that Ireland have their claws into him. He's probably not playing for Canada. It's a real shame. He plays at U17 level for Canada, but it's a really interesting story. I spoke to Rob Friend. I'm actually writing a column about it on Sportsnet. It should be coming out tomorrow, I believe. And just the philosophy at that club about, okay, winning's important, of course it is. But number one is developing that pathway for young players and procuring the best talent in Canada, who right now are often sitting in academies, MLS academies, without pro contracts. So they can be scooped up at any time. I think it's a really interesting one. Within CPL circles, Nate, is it getting a lot of chatter between you all? I mean, this is a pretty great young player.
Yeah, everyone's seen it. Everyone's excited about it. the Canadian soccer landscape's opened up a ton since CPL started. You know, like, thank God we have it, because we're watching a lot of these guys get on the map. And I mean, Laturi coming back to Montreal recently is a great little story. But you know, with McDonald, it's amazing. Like, we're gonna reap the benefits in I don't know how many years. I think I like the thought that McDonald's with Canada, to be honest. I don't know why, you know, someone who's living on Canada soil, who's played for, you know, Vancouver, who's made a start here, who got the sale from there, wouldn't want to come back to, in my opinion, a much better football team in Canada than Ireland, right? Now, I don't know what it's like to have family from, you know, a footballing country and hold 2 passports. But I know how exciting Canada is right now. And I'm telling you, if he gets a call from Jesse Marsh, I think it's going to be hard to say no to that. You know, the staff knows what they're doing, and we got an exciting group. So we're
I love that. I love that. And I hope you're right. And I'm sure Jesse Marsh is having conversations or plans to at some point. But I mean, being a European player with a European passport, playing for a European team in Europe just opens up so many doors for you, Dubs. That's the thing, commercially and otherwise. And it sucks for Canadians in that regard. Now, listen, our reputation is improving all the time. We're seeing that just this deadline, you know, with these big names making the move. But of course, you want to see him commit to Canada. But I do understand why he's chosen Ireland at this point.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that he won't come back to Canada. And as Nate really astutely pointed out, I would be amazed if Jesse Marsh hasn't had a conversation with him up until this point, right? Like, for sure, he's definitely been on the radar, and I think that the conversation has already taken place. So I think it's opening up. And just to kind of piggyback on what Nate's saying, like the importance of CPL and the existence of academies and infrastructure in Canada, that you can benefit from having that double passport, the dual citizenship, where you don't count as an international going over to clubs in Europe. But then Canada is more and more attractive, I think, as a footballing nation, as a choice, where I think I can say confidently that I think Canada is the choice at this point, if you're comparing Canada to Ireland. And I want to ask Nate about, is it Noah Abatne? Is that how you say his name?
I believe so.
Yeah. So, you know, he had this kind of pathway where he left Ottawa, played with Arsenal and Fulham academies, went to Italy, and then now he's found his way back as a Canadian U21 player, signed with Ottawa, Atletico. So that is Canada again, you know, where you can leave, you can go somewhere else, you can ply your trade in Europe or try your hand and try to catch the eye of scouts of these big clubs, but then kind of come back to Canada, and it's not seen as a failure. It's just seen as, I'm going to come here, I'm going to get challenged in other ways, and do what Jesse Marsh is saying, is give these young players the responsibility of pro minutes, and then see how you fare, see how your game evolves and changes and how you adapt to it. And then it doesn't mean that it's a done deal, that pathway is now closed to go back over to Europe. It's just another opportunity, another option for young players in this country, which I find is really exciting, and models for the next generation too, to say it doesn't have to be pathway A, pathway B. The road less traveled, whatever analogy you want to use, that there's a myriad of options for you if you're a young professional in this country.
Yeah. One thing we say a lot, like as players, and I'll probably get some flack for this, but there's 2 types of players that go over to Europe from Canada and the US. There's the big names, you know, you got Davies and you had Ballou and you had all these guys that went over, and it was a big deal. And then the second group that goes over is generally because they're not good enough to play here, like in North America. When NASL was around, things have changed, right? Like for guys like Ledgerwood or Adam Straith or those guys, like they were forced over, they had to do it. That's life. But now that we got leagues here, it's a good setup. You know, the money in these North American leagues are good. You're playing close to home. The stadiums are nice. You get treated well. Like, it's a good place to play. If you can play here, generally speaking, you do play here. And then the guys that aren't good enough to play here, then they go over to Europe as well, and they'll justify it, and they'll kind of play in lower divisions and try and make it work. And a lot of those guys, when they get the call that they can come back, they're here right away. You know, so those are the 2 kind of groups that go over to Europe. There's nothing bad about what's going on here. And anyone that's played here for X amount of time in these leagues know the level's high, know that we have really good players, and it's going to take time before, the rest of the world's seeing it, which, I mean, we're actually getting there now, which is pretty cool. But it's not an easy thing to play 30 games in these North American leagues and do it year in, year out.
Ireland is 60th in the world, by the way, 60th in the rankings, if you take any stock by that.
And if you look at Ben Fisk, a good friend of mine, he played over in Ireland. If you look at these Scottish and Irish leagues, I know they have a ton of history, and I know the atmosphere is great, and I know how high the level can be. But how many teams are in their league? They're 10, 12 teams. Well, it's not like this crazy thing that we're miles behind. It's not like they have 3 20-team tiers or anything like that. We look at England and we think a lot of other countries are like that, but it's really just kind of the big 4 that have that system. And then once you get outside of that, it gets a little dicey. You go to some of these countries, even big footballing countries, you talk about Greece or, Belgium, Romania. When you get into those lower divisions, you start losing games. You're not necessarily getting paychecks showing up.
That's a great point.
Things get weird over there. So,
but it's true. I mean, just this, it's this perception of Europe, right? You think of Ireland, oh yeah, well that's a really good international team, that dwarfs Canada. But no, the reality is, like you said there, Canada's actually a better international team, potentially producing better, in greater numbers, young players right now. It's just being so close to the big leagues over there, the eyeballs are on you, I suppose.
Correct.
That's the reason. By the way, Ben Fisk, we're getting Ben on the show very soon.
You guys,
he's got all the time in the world now, right? Because he's retired, so he's got some job at Vancouver, but hey, whatever.
He's one of the best guys in football. He's had a great career. He was over in Spain, and he was actually at the tail end of guys that had to do that as well. Him and I are the same age, and he didn't go to school. So when that 18 kind of rolled around, once Whitecaps finished for him, he had to figure something out, and so he went over to Spain with actually Sammy Piat. They were living together, and grinded it out together. And then at what was it, Deportivo La Coruña, I believe, a couple of there. And then
well done.
Yeah, nice
good
pronunciation.
Yeah.
You're like, what is that? Deportivo Caruna.
That's where Julian de Guzman starred to won a championship there and was player of the year there.
Yeah. Julian's a stud. And then Fisky got a call from NASL, and then he joined myself there. Nick Ledgerwood was there, Adam Straith, few Canadian internationals. But again, he was in Spain doing well, and you get a call from the NASL. It was a great league at the time. You want to be back, And the funny thing is, when he's coming up through the academy, and we've talked about this a ton, so I'm sure he won't mind me sharing. When you're coming up through the academy and you're playing for MLS and you have your eyes on that first team deal, he would have said, going to the NASL is an absolute failure. It's like, oh, I would never do that. But once you get into the real world, once you get into the footballing world and you see what it's like, and you've played a few years, all of a sudden perspective changes and you start to understand, oh, you know what, the money, NASL especially, the money's great here. I'm living in Canada. We got benefits. We got this, we got that. All of a sudden your tune changes a little bit.
I think it's those two things happening at the same time. Is the players within it, whether you're a youth footballer, you're a young man, you're a young woman, and now with the NSL here, we have a domestic professional pathway in Canada. But it's the realization of it when you're immersed in it as a player, that what you have is pretty damn good compared to the rest of the world. But it's what's happening at the same time with the perception of Canada, and that we have it happening concurrently with the rankings. And I don't put a whole heck of a lot of stock in those, but worldwide it does matter. And it matters when you're seated and put in these pots for these major tournaments, that the men's national team has got a high profile coach. They've backed it with results. They have high profile players, but that you have a domestic league that's doing well. You have 3 MLS franchises, long may that continue. And on the women's side as well, you have this history and this legacy of success. And then you also have a domestic league now. And so it's reconciling all of that, the perception of the players that maybe it's not as sexy still, but we're getting there where the appeal and the likelihood of kind of keeping this talent in-house and not kind of exiling the talent or outsourcing the talent, that we can have them here, develop them here, and that we can be confident in our own abilities to do that. We have some strides to make still, but I think we're getting close.
Well, I mean, the Grady McDonalds of the world, right? If they are can be lured to play men's soccer, professional men's soccer, as opposed to youth academies with the MLS teams. That is part of the pathway, even if they're only there for a couple of years. And I know with Grady, the plan was, I think he signed a 3-year deal, but the plan was, a couple of years, with Vancouver. In the end, it was after a year, his ascendancy was so great, and they took advantage, right? But it does show that it's a really good place to get some. People are watching now, right? People are watching the CPL. Rob Friend was saying that you had Bruges scouts watching these games in Vancouver FC in the CPL. If you said that 4 or 5 years ago, people would have laughed in your face, but they are now. It's a legitimate league which is getting more and more respect. And if a Grady of the world makes something of himself in Europe, it's only going to help that. They see him as like a catalyst, and other clubs, I'm sure, in the CPL are watching Vancouver's methods. If not, they're doing it themselves already, saying, yeah, that's not a bad idea. We want to win championships. Of course we do. But if we can develop and become sustainable through the transfer market, why not? Most clubs do that, right, in the world?
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Well, all these big clubs have North American scout, right? They'll have someone that heads up the North American department. If you look at, and they want young players, how many young players are really playing? Like, they have to watch the MLS Next games. They get to watch the young guys playing in MLS that have got their chance, and they get to watch the young guys playing in CPL and USL. So there's not that many games to watch. So when you hear, if there's any professional that's 16, 17, 18, the games are being watched by a lot of scouts. And if they start playing well, then the scouts show up in person. But they're watching all these games, and any young player that's coming up through these leagues, indirectly or directly, they'll be seen. And it's pretty easy to see them when you look at how much football we have in North America compared to countries like Europe.
And watching Grady get interviewed by One Soccer, because when I watch an interview and I listen to it and it's pertinent and it's interesting, I give credit. So it was on One Soccer, and he was talking about how it's a good fit for him to progress, because I think he said like 33% of academy players get playing time. They get promoted through to the first team, and then his dad's in the background and he says 39. So like that seems like it's a good fit for a young man who has aspirations of playing first team football.
For sure. Oh, Dubs.
And yeah, her pettiness.
I'm very, very petty.
So inspiring.
Good morning.
Just a small story. Gareth Wheeler was talking about on a podcast he heard of Jesse Marsh talking with some podcasters. Well, it was our podcast, and he referred to it as, a podcast. So he didn't mention it was Footy Prime. Not saying he should have. I'm just saying Dubs, it's stuck in Dub's craw. So
I'm saying he should have. When you read something,
I don't tell anybody what they should do.
Give credit.
In fairness, I often forget where I saw things. In fairness,
me too.
But no, Dubs, you're right. No, that don't roll your eyes.
Very mature. Dubs up your side.
Everyone's on Dub's side. That's the truth.
Listen, she gets the Premier League weekend. We 45 minutes in. Well, yeah, go ahead.
Well, only because we're talking about CPL. The Concacaf Nations League is this week.
Champions Cup.
Fuck me.
CCC.
Jesus Christ.
Is this a new name?
No, yes, kind of. It's not that new.
Third year?
The Nations League is something completely
different. My point is, Forge is playing, Cavalry is playing, and Atletico and our homie Nate are not playing.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, when you are all of a sudden playing in these kind of cool environments with international stars, is it still annoy you that you didn't make it?
I'm sorry. Are you holding a pair of socks?
I didn't have a chance to put them on.
What are you doing?
Is that a pair of socks?
I'm making a point.
But they are
socks. How are you feeling when you see that? Is it still last year? Are you still thinking of last year?
Sorry. Before you answer, Nate, they are socks. You are. Why are you holding a pair of socks?
I went to put socks on, but the computer wasn't working, so then I had to work on the computer faster. That's why I sent you guys the text saying I'll be on in 2.
Never in the history of broadcast media has someone had a pair of socks in their hands.
I was always a producer. I'm now in front of the camera. I do what I want.
But
Nate, how do you feel when you see those teams play? How are you feeling about that? Like,
Yeah.
does it still remind you of last year's loss in the playoffs?
And
Or is that
honestly,
gone?
not really. I mean, athletes, we have pretty short-term memory. Obviously, you want to be there. You want to be the team playing. But, you know, my time machine still isn't fixed yet, and I can't do anything about it, you know? So you make the most of the situation and you get ready for next year. And in the meantime, you know, obviously I'm supporting both these clubs to try and get a win against Mexican Giants. Like, there's no ego there. You know, it's not like, you know, they cheated us out of anything. They beat us last year. It's fair and square, and they're representing our country, and that's what we want, right? We want the best teams, proven best teams, to go represent us the best way possible in the Champions Cup. So I watch the games, you know, unless I'm at work. But these days, man, what a life this last month, being in Tampa and then being here is no work. It's been great. So,
You're working out, and that's work.
yeah, been
Professional.
able to watch a lot of soccer. Yeah, a lot of double days. So, you know, fitness levels are high, but I'm excited to tune in and watch the boys. And, you know, I've got great relationships with guys across the league. Like, you know, as I alluded to, I've played with a lot of these guys throughout the years, different places, whether it's youth national teams or different clubs. So, you know, and then it's just do everything you can to make sure that they're watching me next year, you know. So
yeah. We were at an event last week, actually. Wonga and I and Jimmy, and actually, what was Gem Events had their 5-year. We mentioned
JC
Gem,
as well.
freaking brilliant. And JC too, of course, yeah. Anyway, some of the CPL guys are there, and we're talking to Mark Noonan and Glenn Johnson, and that topic came up, like how in most leagues, if you're not playing in the teams involved, you kind of, well, not so rooting against them, but you're not supporting them per se. But the CPL is different, right? Seeing the Cavalry and seeing Forge playing at this level, and this is so important for the league's growth, which is going to benefit everyone. I think there's a lot of support behind those two teams within the league, even from those staunch rivals, guys that, you know, you're 90 minutes on a Saturday or a Sunday, you really despise them. But this week, you kind of all Forge, all Cavalry. That's kind of the sense I get.
yeah, it's us against the world, you know, like,
Yeah,
we're
right.
really trying to prove the concept of football in Canada. And for the guys that have been in the trenches, you know, before me and into, you know, my generation, we just want it to be, you know, we want this all to be over. We want to have our own league. We want it to be stable. We want to be able to make good money in our country. We want to be able to go back to the stadiums when we retire and watch the games. Like, it has been a grind for anyone, especially if you don't hold a European passport or an American passport. Like, it is so hard. You know, like the assistant sporting director here made a joke to me yesterday. He was just like, listen, he goes, you know, marry an American, we'll see you next preseason. You know, like, you hear things like this and you're just like, the international rules have been very difficult for Canadians for a long time. And we finally got a league where the international rules benefit us, right? They take care of Canadians, and we're only allowed an X amount of internationals and, you know, X, Y, Z. So we treat, like, we're so thankful that we have it. We're doing everything we can to keep it. We're doing everything we can to grow it. You know, that's why I reached out to Dubs when the Rapid got to town. It's like, it's a startup. It's going to be difficult. Let's try and help each other. You know, like, it's so important. We're the biggest hockey country in the world, and we don't have our own hockey league. You know what I mean? Like, how hard it is to have a league in Canada and be successful. You think I'm going to try and tear down Forge and Calgary right now? It's so ridiculous. Like, every one of us is trying to help each other out. Coaches, same thing. Front office, same thing. Media, I hope the same thing. Everything I've seen, all they've tried to do is build up players, build stories, you know. So yeah, it really does feel us against the world for Canada soccer. And again, if we can knock off a giant and like a young history, it would just be, you know, it's David and Goliath, but Goliath actually died in that story. I don't know if you read it.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I love that.